What's up, fellow go givers? JuJuan Buford here. And what I want to talk about today is a conversation I had recently with one of my business partners. And the question she asked was, look, how do you know whether or not someone's for real or whether or not they're a pretender, right? And how do you avoid wasting time with them? And I want to be a little bit more specific, a little bit more granular than I typically am on talks like this. When I'm speaking with my business partner, the context is we're talking about within the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? So you're a brand new entrepreneur, regardless of what industry you may be involved in. You're a team of me looking to grow from a team, looking to grow from a team of me to a team of we, right? And it was so much I could have shared, but I try to condense this down in a very short period of time in discussion we had. And I'm going to give you a little bit of insight to the conversation I had with her. Hopefully it serves you, right? So the first thing that I shared was timing, right? Timing is very important. And the bottom line is it's the one thing you can't control. And what do I mean by timing? It's just simply catching people when they've drawn a line in the sand. And once again, that's something you really can't control, right? I compared it to like a dog sitting on a nail. I think we've all heard of this story before where, or you haven't, you're going to hear it now, right? So it's a story I've heard frequently where you have a person walking their dog through the neighborhood. And they walk their dog every single day, and they get to the last house on the block where they turn around and head home with their dog. And there's another owner sitting with their dog on the porch, on the back porch. And the individual who's walking the dog hears the other owner's dog wailing all the time, day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out. So finally he says, man, what's going on? Why is your dog always wailing? Why are they always complaining? And the owner on the porch says, look, he's sitting on the nail. And the other person says, well, why doesn't the dog get off the nail? And he says, well, because it doesn't hurt enough. And sometimes it really just boils down to that, right? You have to catch people when they've drawn a line in the sand and they've decided this hurts too much. I need to make a change, right? And a lot of your success will be predicated upon identifying that pain and positing the solution or showing people how your business endeavor can solve that pain for them, right? But you got to catch people who are in pain. Or perhaps if you're forming people, family, occupation, recreation, motivation, you at the minimum get in touch with, find out what's motivating the person, because sometimes it's the carrot. People just want to level up, right? They want to have nicer things. Sometimes they're not running from something. Sometimes they're running to something. But the bottom line is they need to be running. They need to be sprinting. And a lot of that has to do with timing. And sometimes you'll come across individuals and they're in a season in their life, but they're just not ready to take action. They're just not there. On the other hand, you'll catch someone who's just made up their mind like 2 seconds ago before you approach them. And so at the end of the day, what am I saying indirectly? A lot of this is a numbers game. And you need to understand that when you are building a team in any industry. I've seen this in the real estate industry. I've seen this in the investment advising insurance industry. I've seen this in the direct selling industry. I've seen this in the banking industry, which is where I hail from initially. A lot of it has to do with numbers, right? And I remember sitting back and watching people early on in my career, and I developed a sense, if you will, for when people were ready to make a move, when they were really ready to make a change. And that piece is really important. So, all right, the next thing that I shared was, look, I paid close attention to personality and habits, really close attention to that. The bottom line is people who earn 6 figures, who have the mindset, the belief that they can earn 6 figures and above, they have different habits than people who earn 30K and who are stuck there. They just do. Their work ethic is different, especially when we're talking about entrepreneurship, especially when we're talking about self-employment, especially when we're talking about sales, especially when we're talking about entrepreneurs who are new to entrepreneurship. If an entrepreneur is earning 6 figures, or an aspiring entrepreneur is earning 6 figures, or has the mindset and belief they can earn 6 figures, they're just going to move differently than a 30K person. And you got to know that. And once again, it starts with work ethic. Their work ethic is going to be totally different. The frameworks and how they analyze and see the world and themselves in is going to be totally different. They're going to have a different type of hunger because, people out here get it twisted because of social media. Everyone believes everyone's earning 6 and 7 figures and above. They're not. Okay, don't let the Instagram pics fool you. All right, they have a different type of hunger for success. Um, I look and see whether or not they have a track record of overcoming adversity. Because the bottom line is, if you're an entrepreneur, there's going to be some adversity. People get it twisted. They think simply because you choose entrepreneurship, all of a sudden the BS.com is going to stop. No, it isn't. It's just entrepreneurs deal with the BS.com and we do it anyway. Death, disability, hardship, disappointment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We just do it anyway. So I look for evidence of individuals overcoming adversity. The other thing that I look for is whether or not they're learners, right? Whether or not they ask questions, whether or not they have a certain type of curiosity. I haven't met a single person that went from 30 to 100 or 100 to 250 that just didn't have some type of innate curiosity where they just wanted to know everything. Not to the point where they're stalled, right? Not to the point where they're frozen in their tracks as they don't know enough. But as they were making decisions, as they were making moves, they were pouring themselves into the activity, they just had a hunger to know more, right? And this is the other thing I share too, because our conversation kind of veered to, well, how do you know when you found the gem? How do you know when you found the diamond? And I'm just a firm believer, at least for me personally, over the course of almost 2 decades now, right? Being in this entrepreneurship game, I've kind of developed a nose for it, right? A way to avoid overlooking diamonds. And that does not necessarily mean those individuals will be inclined to work with you, but it's important to be able to spot one, right? Because the bottom line is people come to the table with traits, and it doesn't mean that people can't evolve. But typically people come to the table as who they are, right? And so there's no overnight success stories. There's just stories you hear about overnight. There's no overnight diamonds, just people who emerge overnight. And chances are, if you see someone, they have a great work ethic, they're always asking questions, they're always inquisitive, they're hungry, they can't sit still, right? They've overcome adversity. I'm just a firm believer that 9 times out of 10, that person's going to be successful, right? It's just a matter of them finding fertile ground, finding their jam, if you will. They're going to be successful. And those are the types of things that I look for in individuals. Are they willing to invest in themselves? If they have $1 to their name, are they willing to invest 50 cents? If they have $100 to their name, are they willing to invest $20? If they have $100,000 to them, are they willing to invest $20,000 to show up where they need to show up, get into the spaces they need to get into, be involved with the people whom they need to be involved with? Are they willing to show up? Are they willing to walk into a room and not be the number one, but the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 20, right? Those are some of the things that I look for. You know, the other thing that I shared was, look, I'm a big fan of giving people assignments and watching their behavior. People that I avoid at all costs are people who blame other people. The moment I hear someone blaming somebody else for anything that's transpired in their lives, I start putting distance between myself and that person. The bottom line is, what I've learned over the course of time is that people who are very successful in any endeavor, they have unreasonable accountability. They have unreasonable accountability, right? Whatever's transpired in their lives, they own it. And so that's one way to avoid dealing with people who are pretenders, right? Avoiding people who are blamers, paying close attention to people who take accountability for everything, even when it wasn't their fault. Even when they were right in a situation, they'll still take accountability for it. You want to pay close attention to people like that, right? Do they keep their time commitments? There's a business owner that I'm dealing with right now who 2 times in a row, they've missed appointments, missed time commitments. A couple times they didn't even bother to notify, right? Or they waited until 10 minutes after the time commitment to notify. I pay close attention to things like that, right? I watch those things. You know, sometimes when you're just starting out, particularly in the direct selling industry, you're hungry for any and everybody who are willing to join you. But I'm telling you, it will save you a lot of time if you exercise some discernment. A person that shows up late repeatedly, a person that's unapologetic about certain type of trifling behavior, trust me, chances are it's a habit. And they're going to keep doing it over and over again. And you're just going to be upset. You're going to be frustrated. I pay attention to things like that, right? You show me where someone spends their time, I show you where the priorities are at. Look, we all have the same amount of time at the end of the day. So what's the difference between a person that earns $100 an hour, $1,000 an hour, $15 an hour? It's their priorities, how they're spending their time. It's the skills they're pouring into that time, and it's the value they're bringing to the marketplace. I'm not knocking people who work at McDonald's or who's working at the Dollar Tree or whatever at a cash register. But the bottom line is the marketplace has decided that skill set that you have is worth $15 an hour. Versus if you are solving problems for people who earn 6 and 7 figures, chances are they're not oftentimes even paying for your skills or talent. They're paying for the time that you can get something done more efficiently than they can, right? And so it's important to understand that, right? Are people spending time doing things that align with their goals, especially financially? And I'm not knocking people for going bowling. I'm not knocking people for wanting to go out every single night. Hey, to each their own, no judgment here. I'm not knocking individuals who want to spend 10 hours a day on social media. Not knocking you, no judgment here. But is that in alignment with you being successful as an entrepreneur? Is that in alignment with you reaching your financial goals? And I'm gonna come back to that, right? Giving people assignments. Did they watch the training? I will purposely send people trainings, not dissertations that last 2 and 3 hours, but short 8-10 minute trainings. Just see if you watch it. I'll find out whether or not you registered for a training that was available to you, because we know as entrepreneurs, the only place for success comes for training and knowledge is in the dictionary, right? I will view whether or not they've looked at certain content that I've mentioned to them, or a book or audio or something they can use to pour into them. I'll look to see if they follow directions. You know, something I used to do back in the day, I would knock stuff off my table. So I was sitting at a desk and I would knock a pen off or an empty cup or my keys or something. I would knock it off the table and I would watch to see whether or not they would make an effort to pick it up or catch it, right? Or as I would stand up to walk around the table to pick the item up, whether or not they would beat me to it. I pay attention to things like that. I love taking people out to the restaurant or to a restaurant or to a cafe. And I pay close attention to how they treat people who have a lower social status in them. That tells me a lot about them, right? I'll give people small assignments and then make sure I give them recognition, because we know snowflakes turn into snowballs, right? I'll watch all those different things, right? I watch not only whether or not they show up on time, but how they show up. Are they ready, right? Same conversation. We were having a interaction with a prospect, and the individual had looked at the video that we shared in terms of what it is that we do and what our value prop was, had a million questions, volunteered to attend the next culture building event that we had. I mean, just really showed an excellent degree of assertiveness. Like, he wasn't willing to sit back and just let the process happen. He's like, if I'm interested in this, I'm gonna grab the bull by the horns and I'm gonna engage. I pay attention to things like that, right? I thought it was really key that the person was really interested in culture, because winners understand culture. Only people who don't understand culture are people who haven't built anything. Culture matters. Think about the Pistons in 2004 when they beat down the Lakers, right? Well, quite frankly, any of the Pistons teams that won championships, but specifically 2004. Like, that 2004 team, you can't even name. You won't even be able to name a lot of individuals on that team in another 5-10 years, right? Unless you grew up during that era. I don't think they have any real Hall of Famers who were on that team, who were on the court, right? And I love that team, right, that went and beat down the Lakers. But we know what it was, right? The Lakers had nothing but Hall of Famers, people with superior talent, individuals who, quite frankly, have crushed it in the league. And then 2 players in Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant who were in their prime. But it just goes to show the importance of people being on the same page, the importance of culture, right? People who understand winning know how important that is. And I pay attention to whether or not people tune into that, whether or not they're interested in that. Because it's one thing to join an organization and 1 or 2 people are having success. It's another thing when you join an organization or a team or a company where there's a multitude, where there's a voluminous number of individuals who are winning, right? That's called a huge clue, right? The other thing I pay attention to that I share with her is, look, is a person financially motivated? Maybe not for themselves, but are they financially motivated for others? Because the bottom line, this is entrepreneurship. And if you don't care about finances and the bottom line, capital is like blood to a business. You're going to catch that L. I don't know what else to say about it. Look, I'm a former community activist. I get it. I understand, right? There are people out there, I'm still the same way, who are very much motivated by helping other people. There are people out there who are very much motivated by just creating a space for people to live their best lives. There are people out there who are just about that service. I get it. I understand that too. But one of the most important lessons I learned as an activist and as an entrepreneur as well is that a sinking ship can't save another sinking ship. I'll leave it at that, right? So we're talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about building sales teams. We're talking about building entrepreneurial squads, teams, cadres, communities. You got to be around individuals who understand that. Now, look, I spent a lot of time talking about the things that you should look for in a potential partner, right? That you should look for in a potential staff person, employee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A framework that I like to think about when I'm considering whether or not to work with someone is an acronym. I call it GAS, right? Yeah, I hung around a bunch of Southern women so to talk about cooking with gas. So I think about this acronym. I think I probably borrowed bits and pieces of it from a multitude of books I've written as well. But number one, a good framework to kind of summarize all of this is pay attention to whether or not someone gets it, whether or not they get the mission. If they don't get the mission, if they're not about the value prop, they're not about the impact you're making in the community, chances are they're a mercenary. And mercenaries are cool to work with in the short term, but you don't want to build around them because they're just that, they're mercenaries. The moment it doesn't serve them, as opposed to the people they're around, or the moment it doesn't serve the mission, they will stab you in the back, they'll jump ship on you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to pay attention to whether or not people really get it, whether or not they're amped, whether or not they're motivated to go out there and make the difference in the world that your business or organization is designed to make, right? People can respect what you do. They can love what you do. They can really appreciate it. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to be accountable to it. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to come in early and leave late. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to go the extra mile, right? I pay close attention to those things. You should too. Whether or not people have the skills to pay the bills. Man, yeah, it is so very true that oftentimes it's not what you know, but who you know, but that can go too far. At some point, man, if people don't have the requisite skills, they don't have the talent and the knowledge stack to perform a job, you can only get away with that for so long. Because let me tell you what happens. This is so key right now. This resonates with me so much right now. You show me an organization that rewards relationships as opposed to shining a light and recognizing and rewarding individuals who put in the work, who get it out the dirt, who perform, and you're going to be showing me an organization that won't be around long. You can coast for a little while. You can get away with that for a little while. But eventually, look, this is entrepreneurship. This is not a social organization that you're building as an entrepreneur, right? Results matter. And sooner or later, we've seen so many businesses over the last 20, 30 years who fell apart because they were so vested in the status quo. They were so vested in just maintaining things as they are that they got crushed because they weren't able to adapt. They really weren't watching the KPIs. They really weren't watching the long-term value of their customers and clients and meeting the needs of those individuals, right? Or those collectors or those markets. Don't let that be you. Pay attention to skill sets. Always be looking to upgrade. Always be looking to upgrade in terms of talent, right? So those things are important. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into this because there are some things you have to do for yourself too as an entrepreneur. There's a certain degree of responsibility you have to take, right? Are you setting expectations for the people that you work with, right? Are you letting people know what the milestones are to determine whether or not they're having success, whether or not they're growing, or whether or not they're cut out to do the work, right? To work with you and be an effective partner. personnel, staff, whatever the case may be. You want to make sure you're providing further ground for training and help a person become more knowledgeable, because some people will come to the table and they don't have the skills to pay the bills yet. But if they're willing to learn, if they're willing to pay the price, if they're willing to be coached, you got to make sure you put resources available to them. You put them in touch with the right people, the right books, the right seminars, workshops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However you do the thing, you have to take responsibility and make sure you give everyone the same opportunity to level up, right? And then you got to be able to motivate people, be able to inspire them. Sometimes you have to be the inspiration. Sometimes as a leader, not only do you have to show up for yourself when you don't feel like you have to show up for others, because when shit hits the fan, when things start going sideways, when you're not hitting your goals, you're not hitting your KPIs, and people are becoming fearful, they're becoming anxious, either because of themselves or the people around them, you have to be the person that shows up, and you have to be rock solid, right? You have to instill confidence in them. You have to instill a sense that you are very much focused on what needs to transpire, and you believe in yourself and you believe in the people around you. If you don't have that going on, you're going to have a hard time building people around you. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But that's the conversation I had with my partner. I hope it lands well with you. As always, I celebrate success in advance. Goodbye for now.